Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are near the end. We have one more video left until we're completely and totally done with Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers. What a ride it's been. It's been pretty wild, hasn't it? Right, it's been pretty crazy, hasn't it? But this is when we finally get to the point where we talk about the origin of the Incursions, how it all started, why it's all happening, the whole 9 yards. So what we end up doing here is we pick up 2 weeks before, like 2 weeks ago, and you've basically got a gathering of the Illuminati. You've got Black Panther, you've got Reed Richards, you've got Brian Braddock, Captain Britain, you've got the Incredible Hulk, you've got Beast, and you have Black Bolt of the Inhumans. And all of them have assembled around the cage containing Tony Stark, right? Superior Iron Man. And what they're basically saying here is that there's been no small debate. They're trying to figure out what to do with Iron Man, because this meeting takes place right before Captain America and his forces meet up with the Illuminati to find out what they're going to do about the Incursions, right? That event, that video that we covered previously. What we end up getting here is this kind of thing where the idea of Tony Stark being there is kind of important because it is Tony Stark and he's so wildly intelligent and capable. The problem with this is the history between Tony Stark and Captain America, right? Remember that what kind of happened here is you had the events of the Incursions kickstarting, right? So we had Iron Man trying to distract Captain America with the Avengers machine, like they had wiped his mind at the beginning of the whole thing, like the original Civil War event. It's all these scenarios that have taken place over the years where this kind of distrust has grown between Captain America and Tony Stark, leading up to the point where Captain America just sort of sees him as like almost his mortal enemy. And so if they allow Tony Stark to be there, this uneasy truce between the Illuminati and the forces of Captain America could completely come to an end. And so the best thing to do is to get him out of there, right? To just remove him from there. Not only that, Iron Man wants to die for something, right? He doesn't want to like die in a cage. And that's what's so crazy is because despite all of this, Iron Man still has an ace up his sleeve. And so ultimately they end up letting him leave, right? They end up letting him get out. Here's the irony about all this too. The true sin of Tony Stark is lost on everyone here, right? The worst thing Iron Man has ever done is lost on everybody here. None of them really know the worst thing that he's done so far, right? It just seems bad. And so ultimately the cage is destroyed and Iron Man is just kind of let loose, right? He's just basically told, leave, do not come back here, right? Like go and do your old thing, you know, do whatever it is that you want to do, right? Like die well, it's the last day for it, but we don't ever want to see you again, right? He's officially been cast out of the Illuminati. Now at this point, we switched to 2 hours ago, right? So we're kind of back in the current moment, but 2 hours beforehand, and we have Gladiator who basically speaks to the entire inhabitants of Earth, right? Just kind of shows up with like a hologram, different things like that, and basically says, you know, most of you here on this world will never truly know the depths that your superheroes have gone to save your world. You just don't know because they don't tell you, right? But recently we fought in a war against the Builders, this multiversal race that was traveling from one universe to the next and wiping out the different Earths that they came across. And because of the help of your Earth's superheroes, we managed to stop them and we managed to wipe out most of the Builder fleet. What was left escaped with their lives. They fled with their lives, right? We saw that when we ended up getting the tail of Hank Pym. What was left of the Builder fleet all consolidated in a singular location and then tried to track down the map makers, and we saw what happened to them, right? Basically the Builders have all pretty much been wiped out now by either by humanity or by the map makers sent by the Ivory Kings, by the Beyonders. And so because of this, what you end up getting is basically like Gladiator saying it doesn't stop there, right? It doesn't just stop at our war, you know, at the war with the Builders. Your Earth's heroes have saved us during the events of like maximum security. They saved us during like the events of the original Secret Wars and the follow-up in Secret Wars 2 when the Beyonder came to your world. They saved us on a multitude of occasions. Operation Galactic Storm, all these things, your Earth superheroes have saved the world. The Kree Skrull War, it's happened over and over and over again. And so it's with a heavy heart that I tell you now, despite all the things that your heroes have done and all the greatness that humanity has bestowed upon the universe in the times in which it saved us, your Earth is the reason why the universe is going to end. And so in order to preserve the universe, we're going to destroy your world. You've got 2 hours. And it's just like, damn, son, like hey, humanity, you got 2 hours to get your affairs in order. Like, if you want to escape the world, now's the time to do it. Good luck. Peace. Like, it's basically it. You got 2 hours to get while the getting's good. And that's when the Earth superheroes are like, okay, but notice this, they don't panic, especially Captain America. And this is the benefit. This is the biggest benefit of Steve Rogers. In the grand scheme of things, Steve Rogers ain't that great, right? He can just run really fast and punch really hard. Rahoo. But when it comes down to like battle scenarios, he is the guy that you want in your corner because he keeps a level head, right? He keeps his head cool. Wind back to the initial meeting that happened between Captain America's forces and the Illuminati, right? There's a point where Captain America is talking to Reed Richards, and one of the things that Reed says is that the intelligence difference between himself and Tony Stark is fractional, but the big difference between Tony Stark's intelligence and Reed Richards' intelligence is that Reed is smart, but he's usually single-minded, right? He focuses on one particular thing. The only time when he ever really focused on a grand number of things was during Jonathan Hickman's Fantastic Four run, when he was trying to solve the problem of everything. But usually whenever Reed is working on, using his intelligence, is to solve a particular problem. When that problem is solved, he moves on to the next one. Tony Stark is not that way. Tony Stark is the greatest multitasker in the entirety of the Marvel universe. It's basically like if there were 15 or 20 Reed Richards all working on different things at the same time. That's what makes Tony Stark so intelligent. That's what makes him so capable. He can focus on multiple Earth-saving strategies at the same time, right? He's just always looking into the future, and he's always thinking what comes next, right? I'm in this scenario. I'm not thinking about the scenario in the moment. I'm thinking about what it's going to look like in 5 years or 10 years or something like that. That, like we mentioned in the previous video, is one of the most important things that you need to remember, that you absolutely have to remember. It's one of the most important things, right? This ability of Tony Stark to look to the future and to see what shape things are going to look like, to see what real chance of success they have, that's going to be the biggest sin of Tony Stark. The worst thing he ever did. That's what all this is going to be. It's all going to lead to that particular point. It's amazing. Like when it's revealed, it's amazing, right? It's absolutely amazing. But Reed Richards basically gives Captain America this device created by Tony Stark, right? Created by Iron Man. And it's just one of the many things that he was working on. Is for him, it was almost like a little side project. This device basically, it controls an object hidden within Jupiter. And this object within Jupiter is one of the planet killers of the Builders from the Builder War during Infinity. I don't know if you guys recall that, but it was one of the vessels, one of the devices that the Builders used to wipe out an entire world. And it's more than enough to destroy an armada. And this is one of the things that Tony Stark was working on. With the whole Builder War and everything going on, while Tony Stark wasn't necessarily there, he understood the power of the Builders and said, hey, we might need this at some point, right? We might need to use this. And so he basically constructed a device that would allow them to remotely control that planet-killing ship. It's just one of these things, just one of the little things that Tony Stark had up his sleeve. The other part of that is, of course, we end up learning that Izzy, that Super Guardian, didn't join the Shi'ar Guard, right? She didn't join Gladiator. When he basically told her, like, you need to evacuate because we're going to wipe out the world, her response was, no, I can't do this. Like, I cannot do this. Like, I cannot turn my back on my people. I cannot side against humanity, right? Everybody that I know is here. If you ask me to do anything else, I will, but I cannot do that one thing, right? And so ultimately, she sides against the Imperial Guard. She stays alongside humanity. The other part of this is that at some point in the early days of the Incursions, that what Advanced Idea Mechanics had been working on was a series of satellites. And these satellites, combined with Robert DaCosta's ability to basically kind of keep them going under the finances that he was offering Advanced Idea Mechanics, the idea was to have these satellites basically harness the thermal energy of the Earth. And that when that was done, they could literally fire off that thermal energy. So literally they could just use the heat of the Earth as a weapon and fire it off. And that's exactly what happens. The issue with this is twofold. The first is that because of the sheer amount of energy this thing is able to use, as soon as it's charged, they have to fire it right off the bat, because if they don't, the Shi'ar and the various armadas who are here, they're going to realize how powerful this energy signature is, and they're going to move out of the way, or they're going to be prepared for it, right? And so it's like, as soon as this is charged up, we have to fire, right? So it's like pulling a gun, right? As soon as you pull it, you have to shoot. Otherwise, they're going to be able to react accordingly. And so with that in mind, as soon as this thing powers up, it fires off and annihilates a massive portion of the armada. And Gladiator and them, they don't even know what happened, right? They're like, what was that? Like, what just happened, man? And it's like we didn't know we didn't know Earth had that kind of technology. We didn't know they had the ability to utilize the entirety of a planet's energy and fire it off at people. And one of the things Gladiator says is like, how many times are we really going to underestimate humans? And it makes sense, right? Because some of the most powerful beings in the entirety of the universe hail from humanity, right? The Marquis of Death, the Molecule Man Owen Reese, Franklin Richards, like Matthew Malloy, Mad Jim Jaspers, like all these super powerful beings are human, right? Even Protege from the alternate reality is a human. It's just how powerful these guys are. Well, I guess he was really more engineered, but nonetheless, Protege is kind of a special example. But it's kind of like, okay, so the response of Gladiator is then ready our vessels, and prepare for another attack, right? As soon as that happens, you immediately have the planet killer ship that arrives on the scene. And so from one side, literally from the back of the armada, you've got the planet killing ship. From Earth itself, you've got this massive energy source getting ready to fire off. And it's like the entire armada is cornered. There's really nowhere for them to go. And it's like, holy cow, Earthlings have cornered an entire armada composed of some of the oldest races in the entirety of of the universe. And Captain America's like open fire, and they literally just start attacking. Like this planet killer just starts annihilating all these different races, right? Like starts annihilating the entirety of the Armada. The issue with this, right? The wrench in the works comes into play when Robert DaCosta goes to fire up the weapon again. And he's told by one of his science advisors, do not do that. Like if you fire this up and you keep doing that, like you're going to approach a critical threshold and like we're going to lose this facility. And DaCosta's like, why would we stop, man? Like why would we stop doing this? Like we've got him on the run. He goes to fire it off again and destroys the facility, right? Their connection to the satellites are lost. The planetary weapon is gone. The Shi'ar immediately pick up on this and they're like, okay, the planetary weapon's gone. Alert the Kree, the Skrulls, the Badoon, alert them all. Let them know that Earth has no more defenses, right? Earth's defense is down now. And his response is send forth the annihilation wave, right? The forces of Annihilus, which in turn will swarm the planet killer, the planet killing ship, which is exactly what they do. They swarm the whole thing and destroy it, right? So now Earth has no real defense left. There's seemingly no real defense here, but Earth still kind of has its ace up its sleeve, and it comes in the form of the Illuminati. If you guys remember the video that we did before, where you had the rogue planet that came out of nowhere, that was basically sent there from Franklin Richards and the Avengers world in the future, it was sent. When Franklin Richards said it's being sent from the future to that point in time because the Earth would need it, this is the reason why. That when the planet was coming in, when it was heading on a collision course and it was going to crash on the Earth, the only way to save the planet was to phase it, right? Was to basically create a device that would allow the Earth and the planet to kind of operate in the same space at the same time. And it moved the planet out of phase. So it was basically like a hologram, more or less. And so what this did is because it made that red rogue Earth intangible, it allowed them to occupy the same space. What the Illuminati do is they switch. They make the Earth itself intangible and they make the actual world tangible. And so essentially it provides a kind of layer of protection. They would have to destroy that red Earth in order to get to Earth, or I guess destroy that red world, that rogue world, in order to get to Earth. And it's not designed to be like a finality, it's a stopgap measure. And the reason why it's a stopgap measure is because the last great thing Tony Stark does, right? The great thing that Tony Stark does is he basically chimes into Reed Richards, right? This kind of jumps back a little bit, but he chimes into Reed Richards. And it's one of these things where they have a conversation and Tony says, like, in reality, like a gravity well is just a massive reactor, right? Like that's really all the sun is. It's just a massive reactor, right? It's essentially an atomic bomb in space. What if we could harness that energy, and what if we could use the sun as a weapon? Remember, Tony Stark made that Dyson sphere. Remember, that was one of the things that Tony Stark was working on in the early days of the Incursions. This is why Jonathan Hickman writing is so good, because everything becomes important at the end of the whole run. See, you guys understand why I love Jonathan Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers so much, because all these things that seemed innocuous and unimportant and irrelevant at the beginning of the story, and you find yourself asking, what does this have to do with anything, all becomes important at the end. And that's the whole thing, right? Like Iron Man is basically intending to fire up the Dyson sphere and use the sun as a weapon. And it's one of these things where, like, as soon as Iron Man heard the Armada, right, the spacefaring Armada of the Kree and the Skrulls and the Shi'ar and the Badoon and the Brood and all those guys were heading towards Earth, he immediately made a beeline for Saul's anvil. And it's one of these things where he kind of makes this quote and saying, I am Icarus. And the response of Tony Stark is, you do know the point of that story was that he flew too close to the sun and lost his wings. And Iron Man gives the best response ever. And he says, you know who thinks that way, Reed? And Reed says, who? And he says, people who have never flown. Switch over to Dr. Doom, right? So this man, let me tell y'all something, man. This is, man, let me tell you something. It's amazing, right? It's such an amazing story. Okay, pick up with Dr. Doom and the Molecule Man Owen Reese. Before we picked up with the idea that Dr. Doom was Rabu Malal, the last time we saw them is they had just kind of disappeared together, and we didn't really know where they went to. What they end up doing here is basically, you know, kind of using a device and traveling throughout time and space. They go back 25 years and to an alternate reality. And the whole thing is that Molecule Man wants to show Dr. Doom something, right? He wants to help him understand what it is that needs to happen here. What he shows him is the origin of Molecule Man in an alternate reality. And you've got Owen Reese in this alternate universe basically working on a device. We can assume it's Acme Atomic Corporation. We don't really know. That's where the main Marvel Universe Owen Reese was working at when he got his powers. But this alternate reality version of Owen is working on a device, right? He's working on this thing. The device ends up, you know, kind of activating accidentally and blasts him with a boatload of energy. And he basically just kind of emerges with all this godlike power. He's a walking, talking cosmic cube. The exact same origin as the main Marvel Universe Owen Reese. And and the main Marvel Universe Owen Reese walks up to his alternate reality counterpart and just kind of starts talking to him and says like, do you remember, that when we were younger, that there was, that it was spring and we were chasing a friend, right? We were chasing them through the woods. There was this beautiful white flower that was growing beside a large oak tree that had caught our attention. We stopped running so we could lean down and smell it. They both lived this whole experience. And so the Molecule Man in turn kills this alternate reality counterpart, right? He kills that version of himself and literally it's kind of like, this is what we have to do now, right? It obliterates the entirety of his universe. It wipes out the entirety of that universe in the process, right? The destruction of that Molecule Man basically kills everything. And that's what's kind of cool is because Dr. Doom still doesn't quite understand what's going on. He's like, I don't understand this, right? Molecule Man's like, this is what you have to do. Like that memory of me is now gone. That memory that I had of that moment we were running around and we were in the forest and going after that white, or stopping for that white flower, that memory is now gone. That part of me is now dead. That's just the way that it is. And he says, this is what you must now do, Dr. Doom. And Dr. Doom's like, I don't understand what you're talking about. Like, what does this mean? And he's like, this is how people end up calling you the Great Destroyer. And he hands him the knife. And he's like, I don't understand exactly what you're referring to. So what Molecule Man does is he takes Dr. Doom to the Library of Worlds and says, there was a time in the Marvel multiverse, there was a time here when the Beyonders from the Beyondverse were observing our multiverse, right? And they used the Library of Worlds to do it. They were like scientists who were literally watching our multiverse like a petri dish, wanted to see how it worked. They wanted to understand all this kind of stuff. Before they got to where they are now, before they constructed this grand plan, they were trying to understand us. And he says, the Library of Worlds is where they did it, right? It is from this place that you will operate. And it's from this place that you will do everything in your power to stop the Beyonders. You have to understand, I am not a human in the traditional sense. I am not a being in a normal sense. I'm basically a bomb of the Beyonders. And this is where we start to get this kind of full-on explanation of how all this works and what all's coming together. What the Molecule Man says is that in all the different alternate realities that are out there, there are alternate versions of Dr. Doom. Now notice this, he says that Dr. Doom is somewhat unique in the sense that there are less of him than there should be. That's a direct reference to Jonathan Hickman's Fantastic Four. If you guys remember, if you either read that story or you saw our coverage on that story, that one of the things that was happening is that with the Council of Reed Richards, all these Reeds from alternate realities, they were going to different universes, they were taking different versions of Dr. Doom and they were lobotomizing him and they were sticking him down in the bottom of the Citadel. That's why Owen Reese says that Dr. Doom's unique in the sense that there's not one version of him in every reality, because while there was at one point, those different alternate reality versions were taken and they were lobotomized. But unlike, different universes where Dr. Doom might be a poet or he might be a good man or something like that, every version of Owen Reese across the universe or across the multiverse is the exact same. His origin is the exact same. The life he lived is the exact same. There is no differentiation. It's exactly the same. So imagine if the life you lived up to this point where you're watching this video, that this version of yourself was the exact same across the multiverse. And that's the nature of Owen Reese. And that's why he says, I am the bomb of the Beyonders. The grand scheme that these guys have, right? Where they use the Library of Worlds and they were observing the multiverse. They were curious how life in the multiverse works. The next step was, well, let's destroy it all. Like, let's just blow it all up and let's just see what happens, right? But if we're going to blow up every single universe, how do we amass enough energy to pull that off? Okay, so here's what we're going to do. In every single universe that's out there, we are going to engineer a scenario, right? We're going to create a life source. And this life source, that progress is going to happen the same way across every single universe. So in every single universe, Owen Reese is born into the world and he basically grows up with that same life until he becomes an adult. He gets a job at some kind of technological institution. That might be the only thing that changes, but he gets some job at some kind of technological institution. He works on a kind of system that can basically create cosmic cubes. He ends up creating one, but ultimately there's no containment device for that cube. And so basically he absorbs a portion of the Beyonder's power. The other portion gravitates out into that universe. It becomes the Beyonder from the original Secret Wars. So every reality has its own version of the original Secret Wars from 1984. That child version of the Beyonder is ultimately defeated. And then eventually Molecule Man and that Beyonder are coalesced into a singular entity. And then he basically goes forward with the full brunt of the power of the Beyonders, basically, and then he kind of lives his life going forward from there. It's always the same. And so the idea was we created him, right? The Beyonders created the Molecule Man. He's imbued with all that power. And their goal is to detonate, to literally blow up every single Molecule Man at the same time. That's the idea. That's the whole goal. It's like putting a stick of dynamite in every room at your house and then detonating them all at the same time. You blow your house to smithereens. That's what the Beyonders want to do. And what the Molecule Man tells Dr. Doom is this will wipe out the entirety of the multiverse. You have to stop them. And the only way to stop them is to deactivate the bomb. But because of the fact that every version of me, because we've gone to this point now where every version of me comes into existence, the only real option you have is you can basically try to stop me. You can go back further in time if you want to, but ultimately, like, I will end up coming to existence. There's no way to stop that. So the only way to really stop the bomb is to kill me as soon as my powers activate, right? As soon as I basically gain my abilities, or once I've gained my abilities, to kill me, right? That's the only way to do it. And you have to travel from every universe to the next. And where Dr. Doom says, why is this simply my task? Why aren't you going to come with me? The Molecule Man says, because basically all these versions of myself, we share a singular mind. We all have the same memories. With each version of myself that you destroy, I will lose a portion of myself in the process, right? So it's like if you traveled around the multiverse and killed all your multiversal counterparts, or all your multiversal counterparts were killed, each time you would lose a little less intelligence, right? You would lose a little bit of yourself. Now, the bit of yourself you would lose is microscopic, but the more versions of yourself that are destroyed, the more of yourself you will lose, right? So where 0.0000001% of yourself will be lost with the first version of you that dies, by the time you get to destroying 100,000 versions of yourself, you've lost percentages, like literally whole percentages of your brain, right? You've lost percentages of your mind. You would steadily go insane, and it would get to the point where you would just be kind of a vegetable, more or less, right? So that's why Molecule Man says, I mean, I can go with you on this, but understand that by the time you get to a point where you've destroyed enough universes, I'm gonna be useless here. And that's where Dr. Doom kind of asks the question, what's the point of all this, right? Like, why travel from one universe to the next and destroy you? And he says, because if you do that, yes, it'll destroy the universe. Like, yes, you will basically be killing me, and by virtue of doing that, the energy that I let off will destroy entire universes. But you're 25 years into the past right now, which means you have 25 years until we get to the point where Doctor Strange meets you in the Library of Worlds. And so you have 25 years to kill as many of me as you can across the entirety of the multiverse. The hope of this is that it'll basically stop the Beyonders' ability to detonate all of me at one time. That instead, you'll be able to save something. You'll be able to save some measure of the multiverse. That's the origin of the Incursions. The event that we talked about in the very beginning of Jonathan Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers. An event happened that led to the destruction of that world, and it started a cascading effect that led to the universes crashing into each other. That was Dr. Doom killing Molecule Man in an alternate reality. It wiped out that universe, it created an explosive blast and pushes the universes next to it into the ones next to those universes. And so the idea here is that Dr. Doom is basically racing through time. He's racing through time and racing through alternate realities, trying to kill as many Molecule Men as he possibly can, whilst trying to stabilize all those things at the same time. Now, the reality of this is that the Incursions was an unintended consequence of what Dr. Doom did, but it was a necessary result. It had to happen. There was no way to stop it, right? We knew the Incursions were going to happen, and Dr. Doom knew they would, but the idea was to travel through as many universes as he could and kill as many Molecule Men as he possibly could to save at least something. Because by the time they got to the point where the Incursions were taking place, the idea was they could try to stabilize things, that they could kind of keep the Incursions from happening or slow them down or something along those lines, and ultimately save the multiverse in the process, right? And by whatever manner and whatever means, because the multiverse exists by way of just decisions that are being made, right? So Doctor Strange decides not to become the Sorcerer Supreme, and instead it becomes somebody else. That's an alternate reality that the multiverse will eventually come back, right? Just by virtue of people's decision-making processes. If a possibility exists, there exists a universe for it, and so it'll come back in no time at all. And so on his journey, what he ends up coming across, or at least when he wipes out a Molecule Man, he ends up coming across a young girl who escaped a Sentinel camp, right? So this looks like a universe where the Sentinels had taken over the world, much like we saw in like Days of Future Past. And because of what he did, she kind of asks, why did you do that? And he says, because the death of the Molecule Man will spare universes, right? It'll basically spare all of reality. Now notice, Dr. Doom has kind of hidden his image from this girl. She doesn't really know what he looks like. Instead, he's just kind of a bright light. So nobody really knows what his face is, and nobody can really understand what he's doing because they don't know that it's Dr. Doom doing it. And so what he ends up realizing is that he needs to create a religion. That because of the fact that when Owen Reese is talking to him and says that, like, you've only killed a few thousand of me over the course of the last 5 years, you're gonna have to kill billions and billions of me to really affect the plans of the Beyonders. Dr. Doom realizes, I need more people to do this, right? I can't just do this on my own. I need an army to do it for me, right? I need armies of people that can literally travel around the multiverse with me and kill as many Molecule Men as we possibly can. And so that's when he ends up creating the Black Swans, right? The Black Swans originate in Dr. Doom's desire to kill as many Molecule Men as he could, and he couldn't do it enough on his own. Now, while he's doing that, 10 years in, the Beyonders begin to realize something's wrong. That like Molecule Men across the across the multiverse are being destroyed, because of what use would they be as scientists if they weren't monitoring things, right? If they say, we're going to create all these molecule men, we're going to detonate them all at the same time, they would be terrible scientists if they just create a molecule man and then never paid attention to what happened to them. And so when one molecule man gets destroyed, they can kind of chalk that up and say, okay, like maybe it was just something that went wrong. Maybe it was one of these, maybe it was like a Dark Phoenix saga in their universe, and like it led to the destruction of their whole universe because the Phoenix went nuts in that universe. Who knows, right? One molecule man is no loss. Thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of molecule men dying. Something's wrong here, right? Something's off. And so what the Beyonders did is they basically created a virus. They created a computer code. And what this would do is it would spread throughout the multiverse. And any particular computer organism that achieved self-awareness would and had the ability to basically leave its own universe and go into the multiverse itself would eventually become corrupted by this virus, and it would be turned into a map maker. You guys saw that with the origin of the map makers, but it would become a map maker and it would serve the will of the Beyonders. And the whole purpose of the map makers were to chart worlds where the molecule men had been destroyed by the Black Swans and then to chase them down. So literally what you had here is you had Dr. Doom creating the Black Swans to kill molecule men. Because those molecule men were dying, the Beyonders ended up creating the map makers to find the Black Swans who were killing molecule men. So it was a cat and mouse game, right? Black Swans did the killing, the map makers tried to find them and tried to stop them before they could kill any more molecule men. And so with that being told, Doctor Strange now kind of asked the question, okay, if that's the case, then why is it that Black Swan is different? The Black Swan that we met never mentioned anything about a molecule man. She never mentioned anything about wanting to destroy them. She was just annihilating worlds. And the response of Dr. Doom is, I relied on blind faith. I told all the Black Swans that I had, here's what we're doing. You have to understand that what I'm doing is true, right? Like you have to believe me. And where so many of them believed him just through blind faith, you had some who didn't. You had some who defected, who questioned his own methods, right? Who questioned what it was that he was doing. Those were the Black Swans that appeared to the Black Swan that we saw in the story that basically ended up joining the Cabal, right? The one that we saw at the beginning of Hickman's run. And so what they did is they became disillusioned. That Black Swan ended up basically kind of defecting and then trying to find a way to basically destroy these various worlds, right? But ultimately what she wanted to do is she wanted to find a world that she could inhabit. She wanted to stabilize the Incursions, right? To keep the multiverse from dying. And then once the multiverse was stabilized, right? And she did that by virtue of just destroying worlds, hoping that like, you know, that much like the Black Priest, that it would all kind of stabilize and kind of go back to normal and that the pendulum would stop swinging from left to right, so to speak, and basically find a resting place. She ended up doing that just so she could basically find a world for her to settle down in and then recreate her family, right? That's her whole goal. That's why she's been doing what she's been doing. And so ultimately what Doctor Strange ends up asking is, if they lost faith in you, then why? What did they see that led them to believe that your cause was not as righteous as you made it out to be? And what Dr. Doom ends up doing is opening this kind of, you know, kind of device, or I guess this kind of holding cell. And he opens this holding cell and he shows Doctor Strange what's inside. And Doctor Strange is like, my God, like why would you do something like that? Like what in the heck is going on? Dr. Doom got this idea from the Council of Reeds. What he ended up showing Dr. Doom or Dr. Strange was basically a containment device full of molecule men. This thing is just full of them, because the response of Dr. Doom is, as he started to look around, he asked the question, okay, so if the Beyonders are all powerful, if the Beyonders are these beings that can do pretty much anything, then the question that has to be asked here is, what would happen if they captured a Black Swan and they tortured her, or they read her mind, and the Black Swan told them everything they wanted to know, that I'm Rubu Malal, that I formed the Black Swans to destroy molecule men across the multiverse. What stops them from going back in time and like killing me when I'm a little kid, or stops me from going back in time and killing me before I can start this conquest? And he says their powers are what stop them, that the Beyonders, despite all their abilities, they're restricted to their own timeline. Now remember, we covered that earlier, that the Beyonders are stuck in linear time. They can't travel back and forth. They can do anything they want to, but they can only go forward. They can't go into the past. And so because of that, his idea is, as we've destroyed these molecule men, that's the reason why they didn't rewind time and in that universe and save those molecule men. They can't. There's no way for them to. And so with me realizing that, I knew I had a way to stop them, right? I knew I had a way to do that I could abduct molecule men. And if the molecule men basically harnessed the power of a Beyonder and I wanted to destroy the Beyonders, then instead of these various molecule men being detonated all at the same time to destroy the multiverse, why not detonate all of them in the face of the Beyonders and wipe out all the Beyonders that way? And that's exactly what he did. That Dr. Doom ended up basically calling forth, challenging the Beyonders and saying like come to me, like it is I, you know, that when he approaches this kind of rift in space where the Beyonders were coming from, this sort of access portal to the Beyondverse, where, by the way, you do see the Hammer of Thor. We'll explain why it's there here in a little bit, because it's probably one of the greatest moments in all of Marvel storytelling. He challenges and he calls forth the Beyonders, right? Where they basically say, like, we are from beyond, dreamers, destroyers, all of reality, our whim. Who dares stand before us? The response of Dr. Doom is, I do. And they say, what is this Doom, right? Some paltry man playing something more than what he is. And he says, fools, I am the destroyer. I have broken worlds to taunt you. I have shattered universes to mock you. I have taken what is yours and made it mine. Face me at your own peril if you dare face me at all. And so in turn, they realize this is the guy that's been killing all the molecule men, right? This is the guy that got in the way of our plans. And they say, for the short life left of anything, men and women will weep at the stories of what was done here to you on this day. And then in turn, and probably one of the greatest and one of the greatest responses ever, right? Doom says, I say, no one will ever hear the word Beyonder again. I will erase your name from history itself. And in their anger, the Beyonders come pouring out towards Dr. Doom. And he starts to kind of open this vessel, right? He starts to open this device, this kind of containment cell. And he says, you dared to test us. You dared to toy with us. I dare to throw back in your face. Damn your cause, damn the cost. You will certainly die. And then suddenly Doom starts to realize this is not the way it was supposed to go. He sends all these molecule men towards the Beyonders. He does successfully manage to wipe out all the Beyonders, right? He does successfully manage to kill them all, but inadvertently in the process, Dr. Doom wiping out all the Beyonders is the reason why we went from 100,000, from hundreds of thousands of universes in the multiverse down to less than 24. He didn't mean to do it, but directly and inadvertently, Dr. Doom is the reason why the multiverse's destruction has been sped up. Dr. Doom is the reason why everything is going to die. With that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. In the next video, we will cover the ending of it all, as well as probably the single greatest moment in the history of Thor Hyperion. It is amazing. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.